bonjour, c'est un sincère plaisir d'être ici parmi vous sur Mi'kmaq, le territoire traditionnel de Mi'kmaq. My name is Dominique Souris and I'm the Executive Director of the Youth and Climate Lab. The Youth Climate Lab is all about intergenerational collaboration to drive climate action. And it is my sincere privilege and honor to be able to interview this incredible 23-year-old woman, Larissa Crawford. So she is a mother, she's a recent grad, she's an incredible inclusion and diversity consultant, and was the head delegate to the Y7. She'll tell us a little bit about what the Y7 is, but that took place in May, I think, right? And now she's the Indigenous Policy Advisor to the Ontario government, to the Ministry of Energy, Northern Development, and Mines. So merci d'être ici. We're talking about activating purpose. And so I'd like to turn it to you. What drives your purpose? What is your purpose?
All right. Tansi kiamati Larissa Dishna Kashun. Calgary beat the Toronto, New York, Pimi Famille, Penitang, Jamaica, New York. Hello, good morning. My name is Larissa Crawford. I'm honored to be here today. I just introduced myself in Michif, which is a Métis language commonly spoken among Métis people. And I guess that kind of brings me to my why. My culture, my family's history, my family's future are what drive my work. And it's really important. We were talking about how this might be a daunting question to ask someone is, what is your purpose? But if you don't start with your purpose, then you are at risk of engaging in things and doing things that don't align with your personal values, with your identity, with the kind of impact that you want to leave. And so my purpose, I really started defining my purpose when I had my daughter. So I had my daughter, Zara Hanchak, with my amazing partner, Colton. We had her when I was in my 4th year of university, of my undergrad. And at that time, at 21, I was really just thinking, okay, what am I doing bringing this little life into the world? I really started thinking about the kind of mother that I want to be and the kind of world that I want my child to be brought up in. And once I started thinking about that, that's when I really started getting motivated. I'd always been engaged. I'd always been a volunteer, but this is the point where I really started acting with a purpose that was driving everything inside of me. I started bringing her to class at 12 days old. I brought her to plenty of the Y7 summits. I brought her to most of my speaking engagements. I speak across Canada and internationally, and I brought her to those. I volunteer way more than I ever have. I have 4 jobs right now. I had 4 jobs when I was finishing my undergrad. When I did finish my undergrad, I was able to graduate summa cum laude at the top of my class. And I did this because I had a new sense of purpose, and I was able to really define that the work that I'm doing is for my communities, for my generations to come. And once I started doing that, that is when I really saw, the success that I'm seeing now. And that's what drives the work that I do. So the work that I do is very personal to me. And I don't take on anything that I don't feel will lead to the impact that I'm seeking to make, because everything that I do may take time away from my family, and that is what's most important to me. So I guess that's kind of what drives the work that I do.
That's amazing. I'd love if you could tell us about the Y7 and why that was an interesting platform for you to
Yes. So Y7 was such a phenomenal experience because it was a youth-led international government event. And so the Y7 Summit and the Y7 delegates were for the first time, a formal proponent of the G7 Summit. And so we had the opportunity to sit down with the G7 ministers and speak to them directly. I had the opportunity in a very big UN-style room to lead a conversation with the G7 Minister Peter Bean, who, may I add, is the reason I'm here today. His leadership in youth engagement is absolutely phenomenal, and it's renowned around the world. People around the world look to Canada as a youth engagement leader. And so it's really interesting to be in this space, and also for their cognizant inclusion of Indigenous people and our perspectives, and the space that we need to occupy in the conversations that we're having. So it was a really great opportunity, and what I really took away from the Y7 Summit was how to influence policymakers, decision makers as a youth. And so again, I'm going back to that idea of going into these spaces with a very well-established why and a very well-established understanding of identity and values. Because I stood out, because I wasn't afraid to speak on behalf of the people that I care about, of my communities. I wasn't scared to say things that might make people uncomfortable, and things that needed to be said. And again, my invitation came directly from the influence of Peter Bean, seeking out and making sure that I was able to come today to these meetings in this expo. So the Y7 Summit and the Y7 experience has really changed the narrative of spaces like this, and has really changed our ability as youth to engage in policy. And they actually, young diplomats actually just received UN advisor status. And so they're moving up, they're creating more credibility for youth, and again, more spaces for youth to be engaged in important conversations where too often we're left out. So I really enjoyed the Y7 Summit experience.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think you're just proof of how young people are partners for action, especially in conversation around oceans, climate change. And so I'm curious how that experience translates into your other work.
Yeah.
You work at the ministry, you have all these other jobs.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So the Y7 Summit experience and the experience that I had and the connections that I made actually played a very big part in going in being selected to partake in the Ministry of Energy specifically. That's where I'm working in the Indigenous Energy Policy Unit. And an interesting kind of point about the ministry. So, the Ministry of Energy, as far as we've been able to come up with, I'm the only self-identified Indigenous person working in my building. I'm the only self-identified Indigenous person working on the Indigenous Energy Policy Unit. And that's an issue. And so the ministry recognized that, and that this was an issue across the ministries, that there weren't enough Indigenous people working within these spaces. And they're doing an amazing thing in terms of the Ministry Indigenous Intern Program pilot program. And it's the equity measure that I was brought on with the ministry. And so they identified this gap, and they developed a pilot program to bring in young Indigenous professionals into these spaces to, again, start to make this work more efficient, more appropriate, and more relevant to the communities that they're serving, especially within the Ministry of Energy, especially when we're working on Indigenous lands, when we have to work with the duty of consultation, but also simply just establishing those relationships with Indigenous peoples and harnessing that Indigenous knowledge that is, again, some of the most useful knowledge you can have in developing energy projects, in fighting climate change. And so it's been a really interesting opportunity in terms of, again, bringing my knowledge and my lived experience into a space where that may be absent. And so it's been a really interesting opportunity. And I've been actually given quite big files. I've been given a lot of
agency in my role. And when I think about inclusion, that's what I'm thinking about, where I can have the opportunity to be Indigenous within that space, to not have to follow all of the rules, to not have to stay within this box, but to be given the opportunity to speak my mind and use my lived experience and use my knowledge in the work that I'm doing. So, yeah.
I want to talk about spaces, and I want to talk about what it takes to go beyond consultation to partnership, especially when it comes to Indigenous communities, racialized communities, young people.
So, this is actually something, this is a topic that should have been required for everyone here. The fact that there are so many important people walking around right now, and that at no point have we really talked about inclusion or diversity within these spaces until now. And when we're looking at who's here and who's listening right now, and there are so many empty spaces, this is a reflection of the value that we're putting on what kind of knowledge we're bringing to spaces and what kind of people we're uplifting, especially within the sector of climate change and sustainability. And this is a huge issue. Now, we had the opportunity yesterday to speak with the Unilever CEO, Paul Coleman, which was phenomenal. And we really had the opportunity to talk about inclusion and diversity. And I had the opportunity to bring out an observation. And this observation is at no fault the organizers' fault, because they have done a phenomenal job in 52 days to get this thing organized. But this is a reflection of failures of this sector, of our failure to uplift diverse people, to uplift youth. When I walked into the room yesterday of almost 200 experts and politicians and CEOs, I was the only Black delegate. And guaranteed that not everyone had thought about that. When you go into spaces, do you look around and see that there are other races? Do you identify that, oh wow, she's the only person in here who may have those life experiences, or she's the only person in here that looks like that? Have you ever, think to yourself, do you ever walk into spaces and have those thoughts? Because guaranteed, if there's someone who walks in and they're the only person that looks like that, that is a thought that crosses their mind. And to respond to that by, oh, I don't see color. Oh, I didn't even notice that. We're all here together. We're all working for the same thing. That is not a sufficient answer. That is not a sufficient response. Angela Davis had said, it is not enough to be non-racist. You have to be anti-racist. You have to actively look at the situations that you're in, look at the diversity and inclusion, and act on that. You can't just ignore it, because it's going to affect the quality of your work, it's going to affect the reliability of your work, the efficiency of your work, the relevancy of your work. It's going to impact all of that. And I think that's something that we really need to have more serious discussions on, and that we need to bring to the higher policy, the higher decision-making tables. Because, again, it is not sufficient to have this lack of diversity within this field. Not when Indigenous communities, not when racialized communities, not when women and people with disabilities are the hardest hit by climate change. When they are the hardest hit by what we're seeing here today in the world. We have heard the stats, we have heard the science.
And another point, in terms of engaging Indigenous people, youth, racialized people, diverse people in these conversations, is that we have to look at what we consider valuable knowledge. and what we consider merit and what we consider to be science. Because it is not enough to only bring in scientists. Not when there's such a plethora of diverse knowledge that is in the communities, that are from traditional elders that have been, that are in contact with the land. 20% of the world's landmass is occupied and used by Indigenous people. They have seen, they are able to see firsthand the impact of climate change. Why are we not harnessing that knowledge? Why are we going into those communities and hiring them? Bringing them on beyond consultation, but bringing them on onto our team to direct our programming, to direct our research. We need to be going into those communities and again, bringing in their participation, not only as consultants, but as meaningful members of our teams and meaningful hires, where they are in positions where they can share that knowledge. And so, I think this is just so important, again, by looking at what we're qualifying as valuable knowledge, because I go into too many spaces where I don't see that knowledge reflected, that diversity of knowledge reflected in spaces, again, like this, in spaces in government, in spaces where the decisions are being made. And to recognize the diversity of these communities, that people are going to have different opinions, especially within Indigenous communities. I couldn't speak to Aboriginal knowledge or perspectives on climate change because they're so diverse, and I don't think that it would do you guys much good if I spoke too much to that, when that could be the complete opposite for where you're working. It could be the complete opposite for the Indigenous peoples or the racialized peoples or the youth within the spaces that you may be operating. And so it's so important to look at how your organization, how you as a person are engaging, again, with these communities. And in doing that, if you don't have the capacity to maybe hire, you should always have the capacity to hire diverse people. But if you are in a position where you can bring in outside consultation, that's what I do. As a diversity and inclusion trainer, I go into organizations and I help assess their policy, I help assess their hiring practices, I help assess the organizational culture. Because you might have diversity, but people don't feel comfortable or safe to identify as Indigenous. That happens much too often. That's happened to me. I was only able to institutionally self-identify when I was 20. Because I never felt that safety. And it wasn't until I really connected with a few mentors that I was able to self-identify in institutional spaces. And so creating that space where people can identify, where people can be proud to be Black in the position that they're in, where they feel the safety to say or challenge what's being done because it influences their people differently. You have to create space for that. And sometimes you need consultation. I think what Mike Gerbis did today was absolutely phenomenal, and it gave me such a sense of happiness and relaxation and safety when in the speaker room he came up to me and he talked about the concerns I had, and he acknowledged that we need to do more, and he acknowledged that to me, and he took the time to talk to me about that. And that is something that any organizer can do. That is something that anyone in a position of power can do, again, with those people that may be excluded, or that may be traditionally excluded from where you're working, the spaces that you're working. And so again, bringing in hires or outside consultation to be able to really look at that, because communities across the world to understand, what does inclusion look to you? What does exclusion look to you? And I've invested my life in understanding that. That's not something that you can push on to a member of your team who doesn't have background in this. And so you really have to understand not only that this has to be done, but being able to be in a position where you can invest in that. Again, bringing in outside consultation, bringing in hires. You have to be able to put your resources where those mandates are. You can't just put it on a policy, put it on a vision statement, and okay, we're good. You really have to make those investments. And so those are some of the most important points, I feel, that we would need to start off with before we can talk about or move too much more forward with, again, fighting climate change when we aren't seeing the diversity that we need to in spaces like this. And again, that's starting from, I guess, sorry, I want to go a bit into this. That's also recognizing at an educational level too, and at the opportunities that we're offering these people, is that, again, the reflection of diversity is a failure on all of us. It's a failure on programs, on education, to be able to uplift people into a position where they could be at these spaces. I am in a very privileged position where I've had the opportunity to get education, support from my community, support from my family, to be here today, to have this knowledge and be able to communicate it in a way that you can understand. And that's privilege, that's for me. And I do want to recognize that there's some amazing work going on right now. If you have a chance, go check out the Students on ICE program. They are doing some phenomenal work in terms of bringing in and including really meaningfully with the local communities, especially up north. So just an example at the top of my head, they were doing some amazing work in terms of diversity, inclusion in the most meaningful ways possible.
And they're right there, right?
Yeah, they're just on the other side with a big map on the floor.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Larissa.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing conversations of privilege, of creating better, more inclusive spaces here. I wish we could talk all day about this.
Right.
Fortunately, we do have to wrap up, but
Yeah.
I just want to thank you, because as we move to address these monumental tasks of climate change, ridding our oceans of plastics, we really need to be creating better spaces to drive better action.
And can I just say one more thing? I don't want to leave you just with like, everyone needs to do this, this, and this. The W7 and the Y7 have actually done amazing work and research and forums on exactly what I've spoken about. And you can actually find their documents on the main G7 document page. And especially the Y7 Feminist Visions of the G7 Summit, that document is gold in terms of an actual tangible approach. And then the Y7 call to action is, again, gold. We spent a lot of time making that call to action, and it is a really great reflection of diverse youth, their perspectives and what we want. And then again, the Y7 climate change call to action.
Taking notes?
Yeah. That one is very specific to climate change work and sustainability work. So again, those three documents are gold if you're looking to address the topics that I've talked about today.
Well, thank you so much, and giving us some reading, some homework to do.
Yes.